OK, let's get into our first topic then. And do passport rules show that Brexit was a mistake? Get your calls in for this now. If you're travelling to the EU, you need to make sure that you don't get caught out in the passport 10-year rule. Now, travellers from the UK used to be able to carry their old passports for up to 9 months before getting a new one. But now, after Brexit, this rule no longer applies. Take a look at this. Can we see? So your passport has to be valid, there you go, for at least 3 months after the date you decided to leave the EU country that you were visiting. And passports that were issued more than 10 years before the date you entered the country won't be accepted. So what do you make of this, Nina?
Well, it's just a microcosm of what's happened when the disaster that was Brexit, which still makes me apoplectic, frankly. So people can't complain. If they voted leave, they can't complain about being stuck in a queue. And I suppose this is an inconvenience rather than a disaster, which the rest of Brexit seems to me. We are now, Obama said in terms of America, we'd be at the back of the queue. When it comes to the EU, we're in the queue with the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So we have to abide by those regulations, and the EU and the French are entitled to have the regulations that they've always had. So it means that we will have to go through using a biometric thing. We have to give our thumbprint or our fingerprints. We'll do the eye thing. It's going to take far longer. There are going to be queues at Dover, queues at blah, blah, blah. That seems to me almost like a mere bagatelle compared to the disaster that we've seen in everything else. Trade, the trade that's been decimated, the industries that have been decimated. Look at the hospitality industry. After Brexit, everybody left.
That was COVID.
The NHS, everybody left. So this is a microcosm.
To summarise, this is maybe the cherry on the cake of much bigger disasters.
Much bigger disasters, absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Belinda, I feel like you might feel differently.
Totally, completely the opposite. How on earth can a country making its own laws, self-determining its own destination, be a disaster? Is America, Australia, Canada? It is the government in power is different from Brexit, which is the UK just self-determining its own laws. And I am deeply concerned about the force, the drive to stop the UK making its own laws. Why are people so scared of it? Number two, why are people so scared of the British public having more of a say in their own laws that they have to live under? The Armageddon predictions that were brought to our ears from 2016, we had years and years of England's going to disappear, there'll be no trade, the world will come to an end if we Brexit. And all they've got is a few airport queues and forms to fill. That's so pathetic. Rejoin, if all they have to sell this project back to us is give up democracy, pay billions into the dark corridors of Brussels where you'll never find out where it's gone, is that you'll have shorter airport queues and a few less. It's pathetic. It's nothing to do with
Brexit
has not been a disaster. That means any self-governing country, by definition, is therefore a disaster.
If you have a government that can govern, our trade has gone down by 5%. All these magnificent trade deals that we're supposed to have done with India and the States, non-existent.
We've had COVID for years as well.
So have other countries, so have all the other countries in the world, and they're not.
They are suffering. The EU is in a mess.
Not as badly as we are. We are. If you look at any kind of aspect of our lives today, what is better off? You've got a blue passport. You-hoo.
But Belinda, would you say that the Brexit that we have seen is the Brexit that you were expecting?
So I was in no doubt that Westminster, the civil service, were 100% against Brexit, bar a few ragtails that were kind of the Spartans on our side. So we always knew, even if we were going to get Brexit over the line, the force within Westminster was such that we were always going to get a bit of a dog's dinner. The point is we have left, which is absolutely essential. It is a gift. It is a win.
Why? Because... Explain to me.
All right,
explain
Nina,
to me. What is the one thing... Name me one practical thing, a way in which your life has improved since Brexit.
This is the deep selfishness and self-interest of many rejoiners or the hardcore Remainers. Everything has to be about what they personally benefit from.
Just give me one example.
I will. I've got several examples, many examples. The meetings I had, the marches I had from the north of England to the south, meeting every day Brexit voters, they were quite clear. This is a vote not for how much money they would have, but to protect the ballot box for future generations and where the EU was heading. Now, what people don't talk about on the Remain
You're
side,
talking about the ballot box.
the EU is going
democracy
to evolve.
is threatened by Brexit because democracy is threatened by Brexit because we are now free to make our own laws. We are free to actually take ourselves out of international humanitarian
Thank
law.
God. We need
And
to
the
take ourselves out of international treaties. They're dangerous.
European Commission on Human Rights.
Oh, which is horrific and an out-of-date international piece
by
of
Winston
In what way
Churchill.
do you think it's out of date?
So it was set up, say, for example, the ECHR and how it's been interpreted in the Human Rights Act. That was set up in the ruins of the Second World War, where the mass movement of people globally by smugglers and human traffickers was nothing like the situation we have today. I would like to just finish.
A European war had raging, and it was to prevent another European war.
We cannot deport,
which we already have.
Which it didn't do.
It didn't do. We cannot deport rapists, paedophiles, murderers because of this outdated, and I will repeat again, dangerous international human rights law. It is the end of the nation state. It is putting Westminster at the moment are kneeling to this liberal international global stage, far more obsessed with pleasing them than protecting the safety of this country. It is not. It is true. You just look at the case law that we have allowing terrorist suspects. We have a Hamas member being forked out by the taxpayer. We
are
have
making out that everybody who comes to our shores is some kind of and you still haven't answered my question.
Okay, Brexit benefits. So the reason I voted Brexit, and I've done a master's in EU law, I've been a member of Parliament in the Parliament, Nina. I don't just read the tabloids and have angst against, sovereignty.
I don't just read the tabloids and have angst. How dare you?
I'm just saying that I've had lived experience in that fake.
Okay,
terrible
I'm going to get to calls.
Parliament.
You can give us the benefits later. Colin from Nottingham, what's your thoughts on this? We are focusing on passports here, although it does feel like we've diverged somewhat.
Indeed. Good morning. And I'd just like to wish all sentient beings on the planet peace and love. Now,
nice.
The bottom line is the whole Brexit thing, right? I'm an Irishman living in your country for over 34 years. The idea that I can go to my local airport with a British friend and I'll be waiting hours. It's just a practicality. This country made a decision. Now, you can appreciate the standpoint I'm coming from. I mean, beyond belief. But if we're just talking about the practicalities, the Europeans aren't doing anything to harm people in this country. It's just the fact that you bought out of the club. And it's very difficult. Could I just put one final thing? My darling departed wife, Philomena, worked for the university in this city for over 30 years. Her complete joy was the Erasmus program, the free exchange of university students from this country, or her university, all across Europe and vice versa. Well, that's been nipped in the bud.
It has, Colin, but Belinda would say that that's a very small price to pay for what is the future benefits of Brexit.
There are no future benefits for Brexit. Absolutely. Okay, final thing, because I hate to take up time in your show, even though I'm Irish.
No, you're grand.
The bottom line is, I've worked in the corporate world, traveled the world, a lot of work in Europe. When Brexit happened, the calls I got from old colleagues across Europe, the first thing was, do British people not like us anymore? That was the first line.
Mm-hmm. And any other lines, Colin?
Pardon me?
Any other lines? That was their first line. Was there a second?
The first line was, these were very successful international business clients of mine.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a case of, oh my goodness, what are they doing to their own economy? Their first question was, Colin, what have we done wrong Do they not like us anymore?
I think there probably was quite an emotional response. Colin, thank you very much for your call. Nessa from Tyne and Weir, what's your view on the passport situation? So, I mean, if you've got a passport after September 2018, this doesn't really apply because it will only say 10 years on your passport. If you have a passport that was issued to you before 2018, you may have to look in more detail as to when you can travel to the EU. But what's your thoughts on this rule that now applies to us with the EU?
Well, I have to say I'm quite passionate about my response. I was being taken abroad to Barcelona by my daughters, my 70th birthday, and we got stopped at the departure gate. The thing is, my daughters, who'd done everything online, had checked everything. We checked our passports and everything. But I had one of the passports where I got a little bit more than 10 years because I applied slightly early in order to beat the rush of the passport office. Mm-hmm. So actually, two other airlines, if they'd had seats, would have been prepared to take us to Barcelona. But Ryanair totally refused. And I then did some research into it when I got home, and it happened to quite a few people, and that's before September 2023. And I'm quite surprised because this is really quite an old story, and I can imagine perhaps thousands of people have lost their money going on holiday, etc.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't necessarily a new rule. This is a rule that has been in place since Brexit. I think the reason it's come into our psyche or into the papers today is because more and more people are getting caught out with this, because more and more people are coming to the end of their sort of 10-year and 9-month cycle. And so you didn't end up getting to go to Barcelona then, Nessa?
Absolutely not. When we were leaving the airport, the aeroplane was flying across the sky.
Oh, Nessa, I'm so sorry.
So disappointing.
It must have been, but I mean, rules are rules, but it is quite disheartening when you hear Nessa's
and I'm
story.
sorry to hear that. That is awful, and you can have compassion and sympathy for those impacted by this. But I do really think it's up to the airlines to inform their passengers when they're getting to a stage. As you said, we are at a particular time where people are coming to the end of their passports, and I do think it's up to them. We had a massive constitutional shift. There were going to be changes. We've now left for 4 years. I do also think it's important to take responsibility to look into how travel has changed. And I just need to quickly come back to that first caller, if I can.
Yeah.
He says there's no future benefits of Brexit, and it really is important. There are so many benefits, not just getting rid of the policymakers where you can't in the EU. So we can get rid of those who increase immigration now. People can't do that with freedom of movement. But the EU is evolving into less democratic blob, and we are escaping and dodging that bullet. But we've got higher animal welfare standards. We are now, in fact, the IMF has predicted UK is the third fastest growth in the G7, stronger than France, Germany, Italy, 2005 to 8.
I sincerely doubt.
This was the IMF. These are stats that never get sold.
How do you explain the effect on Ireland then? All the disasters of Ireland.
I was in Parliament when we completely knew that this was a red herring trick to keep the UK attached and realigned with the EU.
It was
absolutely. It was the EU putting the border in. We did not put the border in.
And where else should the border have been?
There's no need to have a hard border. There isn't
a need to have a border between EU and the UK.
The EU's own investigator, Carl Larsen, created a 47-page report saying about smart borders would fix the solution. They chucked it in the bin because it gave them leverage. The Northern Ireland thing is a terrible red herring that the EU forced on us.
I'm going to go to the calls now. Sorry, Nina. Christopher from Kent, just one last call before we have to end this part. What do you think about this new 10-year passport rule? I keep saying it's a new rule. It's not. It's since we left, since we Brexited, and we now need to look a little bit more carefully at our passports. Is that just a small measure for a better future?
Yes, of course. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm perfectly happy to take a small inconvenience and even a little drop in GDP to be protected from being inside the EU. Because unfortunately, people have forgotten really how the EU has evolved and is continuing to evolve with more and more countries coming on board. And it's going to be an unsustainable model in the end, a bit like Yugoslavia. I'm afraid. And what I'm more concerned about is the infrastructure, the impact on infrastructure with freedom of movement, and also social cohesion. Those things matter far more to me and a lot of other people than a bit of inconvenience at an airport or a slight decline in GDP, although we're actually doing a lot better in those economic terms than, say, Germany at the moment. So I'm perfectly happy that we're out, and I don't like the way the EU is continuing to evolve, and it's an undemocratic institution. It's run by an executive committee that has, there's 550 million people in Europe, and none of them have voted or been able to vote for any of the executive committee.
I'm just going to let you come back on that very quickly, Nina.
This is what people who voted for Brexit think. It's a pipe dream for something wonderful in the future. The practicality and the reality was that we are, as a country, far worse off.
Maybe that's a short-term thing and things will get better in the future.
350 million for the NHS a week? I don't think so.
We've got more than that a week now.
Come on.
Oh, yes, we have.
OK, I don't think we're going to come to any sort of agreement with these two on the panel,
a blue passport does not make up for that.
I think we can sum that up by saying, Nina, I think we can sum that up by just saying check your passport if you're going to travel to the EU, please. OK, Christopher, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this. After the break, should Scotland legalise assisted dying? They could become the first nation in the UK to do so, but this depends on a bill which is being presented in Holyrood today. But should it become legal, what do you think? 0207 862 2222 is the number. We'll see you after this.